You guys know me. Though I believe there have been a few misses in Phase 4, I'm a big fan of what the MCU has done post-Endgame with the independent stories and alluding to the grander ideas. But with the start of Phase 5, Antman and the Wasp Quantumania has a lot more to balance on its plate, and honestly, I think it did its job well enough. Hey guys, what's back to the video? So I just got watching Antman and the Wasp Quantumania, and it's been one of my most anticipated MCU movies for a very, very long time, and I have a lot of thoughts, both positive and negative, but like I said, this video will be spoiler filled, so I'll be going through all of the little details, every little thing that I want to talk about. So if you haven't already seen this movie, like this video and come back to it later. And if you have already seen Man of the Wasp Quantumania, or you don't mind it getting spoiled for you, let me know what you think of this movie in the comments down below, because as many of you guys might know, the movie has been very, very divisive, and I'm excited to hear everyone's thoughts on it. Also, if you guys are interested in where Antman and the Wasp Quantumania ranks for me and my overall MCU ranking, I'll be dropping a full video on that later this weekend, so subscribe so you don't miss it. And also, I know a lot of you guys like when I talk about my theories, predictions, all that kind of stuff, but I'll be talking about my specific theories and predictions post Quantumania at the very end of this video. And as always, there will be timestamps in the description down below if you want to skip to a certain part of me talking about a certain element of the movie, a certain aspect, or if you just want to skip to the end and hear me talk about the post-credit scenes and my predictions, you guys can choose whatever you want, again with the timestamps in the description down below. But without wasting any more time, let's get right into it, discussing all of my spoiler-filled thoughts on Antman and the Wasp Quantumania. But starting off my spoiler talk, I want to start talking about the overall story, my thoughts on just the direction they took this, because as you guys know, I was anticipating this movie a lot. It's one of my most anticipated MCU movies for the longest time, and you guys will see in this video, I'm very mixed on it. I'll give my score at the end, but I do think the story is one of the weaker links. Not that it's a tonal problem, and I'll talk about tone and characters, all that stuff specifically throughout the video. Again, timestamps will be in the description, but I think the overall story of Kang wanting to escape the quantum realm, that at its core is a very, very great idea. Janet helps him get the core together to leave the quantum realm to power his ship, and then she stops him, and then Ant-Man has to help Kang now. And my biggest problem with this is, on the surface, it still does feel like it could be a personal Ant-Man story, and that's kind of what I like about the Ant-Man franchise. I think Ant-Man 1 is great. It's just outside of my top 10 in the MCU, I think, and then Ant-Man and the Wasp is not that great of a movie, but it's fine. It still tells a good Ant-Man story, in my opinion, but this movie tries to do that with Cassie, and it never really succeeds, in my opinion, and in that, it wastes so much time with trying to build that relationship and move that forward, which I think the family aspect is, again, a great idea. But you don't give it enough time, and then you shy away from other things and make the story feel like it's just being spoon-fed to us, and there's a lot of plot points that are just thrown in there to actually progress the story forward, and they're just kind of coming out of nowhere. Like the whole Hank thing with the ants, I just didn't really like that in terms of just how it was introduced into the story. Hank was like randomly hearing the ants, and they were in a different part of the quantum realm where time was moving faster, and they like enhanced their civilization by like thousands of years, and they became super smart ants, and then they fought Kang's army. Like, it's not that interesting to me. I think if you find it interesting and you're fine with that, that's completely okay. But for me, it was a matter of it just wasn't, it felt like they were cutting corners, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say. And that's kind of what it felt like with Hank and the Wasp. I won't say that the Wasp was bad in this movie. She just didn't have enough time to shine. And obviously we have our comments about the actor herself. I'm talking about the character. I think she could have been utilized more. I really do. And I'm not necessarily specifically sure how in terms of like the Cassie and Scott dynamic, but I just feel like in general, she was there when she had a use case for it. And that feels like a lot of the characters outside of Cassie and Scott, when in my opinion, Cassie didn't even feel like a character that was that intriguing. And I have a whole section about Cassie in this video because I have a lot of thoughts, but I'll get to that later. Again, going back to the overall story, just in general, I think also going into the final act, which I'll talk about later, I do think it's just a weird series of events that happens, and the whole thing with like Modok turning and then helping them, and the way that everything plays out, it doesn't really work in my opinion. And I wish it did, but I just feel like the base of the story is great. Kang wants to escape the quantum realm. Janet doesn't let him escape the quantum realm at first, but they come back. Now it's Scott's duty and all that kind of stuff. And it's great. It's a great basis. But with the execution of the themes that they're trying to go for, it doesn't really work for me. And that inherently goes into the script, and it's a very flawed script, which is I would say the script itself is my least favorite part about this movie, because like the story base is fine, but the way that they execute it is not great. Again, the thing with the ants in the third act, but just in general also Cassie and how like she wasn't as important in the emotional stake of this movie as I wanted. I feel like they really could have elevated the way that Cassie was used. I'm going to talk about Multiverse of Madness in terms of parallels with this movie a decent amount in this video, just because I feel like Multiverse of Madness did an amazing job with like keeping it very stylized like Sam Raimi, also keeping a multiversal story that, yes, it's not as multiversal as we all wanted. I completely get that, but it's still a multiversal story. There's variance, there's understandings of incursions. You really bring out what the multiversal aspect of the future of the MCU can be, while still having a great thematic element of love and not being able to be the one that always guides the knife, and not being able to be in control because fate is in the hands of the multiverse. And that theme comes back at the end of the movie. Here, Cassie, these themes of family and all of these different ideas, they are here for 15 minutes out of like a 2 hour and 10, I don't know the exact runtime this would be. It's a little over 2 hours, and you can't fit that in. And the fact that they tried to fit it in wasted screen time for something you could have developed more to kind of go into the final battle. So that's kind of where I think there's a big flaw, just in terms of it being very emotionally hollow, while the script still feels very descriptive and very explanative. It's a very exposition heavy movie for the future of the MCU, which I don't mind. I actually kind of like that they spent a lot of slower time explaining the multiverse, Kang, and all these different ideas. That's cool. That's great to me. But you spend all this time talking, you lose a lot of your emotional stake in what the movie is meant to do. I feel like they kind of intended it to go back to like the family values and everyone sticking together, you know, helping the little guy, helping that civilization that's stuck in the quantum realm and stuff like that. And that's great. And Cassie wants to like help the little guy, all that kind of stuff. It's like, I understand the story. I understand where you're going. I see I really do see the vision, but nothing ever feels impactful, nothing sticks with it, nothing feels resolved in that sense. And like, I mean, I guess it's just in general, like a lot of like the storytelling aspects also didn't work. Like you rush into the family aspects. Additionally, you rush into just the quantum realm, which is, I don't mind the speed that this movie worked in. Like it was fast as hell and I didn't mind that at all. But what I did mind was the fact that when you speed through this, they're also trying to keep it thematically prevalent, and it doesn't like work at all. Like it just gets muddled down in all these different story things, Kang, multiverse, and then also like Janet hiding everything, which is so stupid to me. That really never worked for me, because I understand what they're going for. Like no one but Janet in the movie knows about Kang, like in the actual like real world human people, but the audience doesn't. So you're building up this like double-edged sort of mystery where Janet's one end, we're one end, because we both know what like is hiding down there. We know who he is. We know who the Conqueror is. And in the middle is Wasp, and then whatever, Cassie, Scott, Hank, all of them, right? And so we're kind of on this teeter-totter line where we know what's gonna happen. And the fact that the buildup is so like stupidly moving forward, like Janet's about to say something and then something else happens. Janet's about to say something else happens. It's like the most cliche things you can think of are happening to stop Janet from telling their characters what they need to do. It feels unimaginative. It doesn't feel creative in that sense. And I'm not saying the whole movie doesn't, because I love what the quantum realm looks like. I love the feel of it. I love the creativity behind this other world. But when I'm talking about creativity here, I mean specifically in the script. I mean specifically in like where we are going into this quantum realm, the transitions between our different characters, different moments, settings, the air. Like it doesn't feel unique in any way, and so it just ends up feeling like lackluster. I'm also going to dedicate this whole section of the video to talking about Cassie, because I don't know I think her name is Catherine Newton or something like that. I apologize. You're probably not watching this, but it doesn't matter. I have to apologize. I'm sorry. I don't mean this towards you. I kind of do. Your performance was not good. Okay? I don't know who the actress was that was in Endgame. I don't know why they didn't bring her back. But that performance that was like 30 seconds to a minute long where she's being reunited with Scott Lang, that was better than the acting in this entire movie by Catherine Newton. Dad, like, there's no emotion at all. There's this one moment where she's like, where Antman is like going through and trying to get the orb thing, and he's getting all these different personality versions of himself, like all the different variants, and the sequence itself is really, really sick. I absolutely love that. I'll talk about the VFX section of this video because that was an amazing trippy sequence. Loved how they played that out. But he's like stuck at the bottom of this tunnel of a bunch of Ant-Mans with their helmets on. He's the only one that doesn't have his helmet on, and he like hears her like talking through the earpiece, and she's like, "You can do it, Dad. Don't give up. Like, you're the man. Like, come back to me, Dad." Like, it's the most unimaginative, uninspiring, like, it's the most uninspiring, inspiring speech I've ever heard. It's so bland. It's just, again, no hate to the actress, but the performance was butt. Like, there's no way you're making a big, like, franchise movie and you're casting this girl out of all, and I don't want to sound mean, but she's arguably the worst part of this movie. Maybe not her, but the acting that is provided by the actress it's one of the worst parts of this movie. Anyways, on a slightly more positive note, I like the general gist of what the protagonists were in this movie, more specifically Scott Lang, because I do have my like qualms with it, and like I do feel like no character except for Kang and Scott really felt real, if that makes sense. Like, I'll talk about Kang in a bit, obviously, but even Janet, she felt like a story point. It didn't feel like we were real. Like, Janet's, actually, I take that back. Janet, Scott, and Kang. I think Janet had a really good impact now that I think about it more. But even like Wasp, Hank, and Cassie, they didn't really feel like they belonged in this movie in a sense. Like, I mean, obviously Cassie belongs in it for the point of giving Ant-Man motivation, all that kind of stuff. I understand that. That's great. But I'm talking about like specifically like when we're in these moments, when we're in these character back and forths, these dialogues, and understanding the multiverse, the backstories, the future, the past, present, and future, basically. It's like we have all of these different moments, and we have these like really cool individual character moments, but when you take them out of these character moments, like when you have Scott and Kang, that first interaction in the little jail cell thing where Kang is threatening Scott, it's one of the best scenes of the entire movie, and it's really, really well done. A lot of people are saying they don't like the camera work, they don't like the composition, all of that kind of stuff. I love it. I love the way that there was like no score in that scene. It's our first introduction to Kang. He's menacing, threatening. He's so amazing in that scene. And again, I'll talk about Kang later because I have a lot to say about him. But I just feel like outside of those moments, like when they're running through the quantum realm, it doesn't feel like they're characters. Like, it just feels like they're part of this big battle, but these characters have no weight when there are main characters. And like, if you look at the other end, it's like when they're in these one-on-one character moments, they feel so powerful, and you actually get to understand motivations, reasoning, and just like a connection between the actors. But in these big set pieces, you just don't get that. And I felt like I got that in Multiverse of Madness, or at least like in Multiverse of Madness, and even like Thor Love and Thunder in a sense. Like, at least the movie ended like with, I don't like Thor Love and Thunder, by the way, just to clarify, do not like the movie. But at the end of the movie, when Gore and Thor are talking about like losing loved ones and stuff like that, I thought that was an interesting like thematic element that they played with, and throughout the movie they play with that element. It's just boggled down by unimaginative, insanely bad SNL jokes, but nevertheless, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania doesn't feel like they have those thematic elements in it at all. Like, there's no connection that I have to these characters to make them feel important in these big scale moments. And that's why I also think the one-on-one fight with Kang and Ant-Man works so well at the end of the movie. And even like Wasp entering in at the last moment, even that works. That works really, really well for me. And just in general, I feel like the end of this movie, I don't like the transition into the end, but the last like 15 minutes of the movie, I would say, there's a lot of great character work, and I feel like a lot of the movie lacked that. Like, unless we were in very specific moments, in general, I felt like I lacked a sense of feeling for characters. And I think it was just a lack of development in this movie alone. Specific characters, I guess Scott, he's great. I mean, I always love Scott. I really love his use in this movie in terms of like, he's funny. He's a funny, I mean, Paul Rudd is a funny guy, right? There's a lot of great jokes, quips. Like, I honestly laughed at a lot of the comedy here, and I'll talk about the comedy in just a second. But I also like that they knew when to get serious. And again, I'll talk about more tonal stuff later. But I really love the way that they balance the humor with Kang's like death, basically, like that death stare that Kang gives when Jonathan Majors talks. And I really love the way that both of them are like polar opposites of each other, but Scott knows when to shut up. Like, he knows when he's being threatened, and I really like that they have a good balance between the two. Hope, she's fine. Her inclusion is like, I mean, it's there for every use case. Same thing with Hank. Cassie sucks, like I said. I think Janet has expositional value, but in general, I didn't really find Janet that interesting of a character. I thought the cold open was great, by the way, and just a quick introduction to Kang, and then you go away, and then you come back to it. I also really liked, actually, I like the way they use Janet in flashbacks and the whole like setup of Kang. I think she was really utilized well there. But aside from that, I just found her character to be annoying. Like, just tell us what's gonna happen. Like, if you told them that Kang is coming earlier in the movie, like as they're like right when they get to the quantum realm or something, like just tell them quicker. Like, I don't know why she's hiding it from Hank and what's her name, in Hope. Like, I don't understand why like she's not telling these characters. That makes no sense to me at all. Like, someone in the comments explain it to me, because that's so dumb that she just doesn't tell any other character about it, because there's no reason to hide it. What is Hope gonna do? Run away? Like, they have to face him no matter what. They have to get out of here, and he's like that idea is their ticket out of here. And so I don't understand what Janet's like motivation for not saying anything was. Like, maybe they didn't want her to, maybe Janet didn't want like everyone else in the family to know that it was like kind of her fault, I guess, but they were going to find out eventually. So it's not like a thing you're putting off to like try and make a quick move and save everything. Like, that's just not, that wasn't the story we got. And so in my opinion, there's just no reason to like go about it that way. But nevertheless, moving on, I did want to mention the humor, just because I think more on like, I'll talk about more of the tone later, but like the humor works, you know, as a whole, right? I think almost every joke, like strictly jokes, I think almost everything hit for me. My biggest problem with the jokes in this movie were that any moment that wasn't like dead serious, it was more of a comedic tone, and there wasn't in between. Like, there was like obviously the introduction scene to Kang. Scott makes a few jokes, but it's because he doesn't know the actual like levity of the situation. He doesn't know what Kang is like possible of doing. But obviously, whenever he finds that out, anytime Kang is on screen with Scott, he understands like this is dead serious. Like, there's no room for jokes here, and he's gonna whoop my butt if I don't like take this seriously. And so I like how there is levity to the situation. There's a lot of weight on what's happening, but I didn't really like. Again, I like the balance between it. Obviously, Modok too. I thought Modok was funny, but I don't know if it was intentional, but I liked it though. Like, sadly, Modok does fit under the humorous category, which I don't know if he should. I don't know. Like, I don't read the comics or anything like that, but I really enjoyed his inclusion. I'm kind of sad that he died off at the end. I don't know if he's going to stay dead. I'm assuming he is, but I like the story with Darren Cross and all that kind of stuff. Strictly design wise, because I know everyone's going to talk about this. I do like the like stretched out face and like fully CG. Like, I think that's really, really cool. I do wish they leaned a little bit more into like the body horror aspect of him, I guess, just in terms of like giving him scarring. And like, I think at the end of the movie when he's like laying on the ground, he has like a bunch of bruises and stuff on his face. I think that shot looks really, really cool, and it feels like he's like beaten up, tortured, and like he's in pain, but you don't really see that with this design. I think this design is good. Like, it's very nice, uncanny valley, and it works for who Modok is. But I feel like they should have, rather than like lean into the humorous aspect of just him being ugly, like just stretched face ugly, looking weird. I think they should have made him look like a little more horrifying, but at the same time, I feel like then it wouldn't fit into the vibe of the Ant-Man movies, which is like, this movie already has a lot of tonal things to do. Anyways, the next thing I want to talk about is how this movie is very exposition first. I think it works, right? I think in general, it works for this movie. Not only like in this movie specifically, but as a start to phase 5, as a start to the multiverse like saga, like we're really getting deep into it at this point, right? So this has to be chapter 1 in a sense. That's my biggest problem though, is because like you have so much exposition and it works here. I think story-wise it works, but character-wise it doesn't, because you have so many expositional moments. You have a lot of these dialogue moments, and like even like Kang talking to Janet in that one part where she's like introducing him. Kang, I don't quote me on this exact line, but Kang says something along the lines of like, time is a cage, but once you learn to free your time from that cage, then you're kind of unstoppable. And it's like moments like those really characterize Kang, but only Kang has those moments in this movie, so everyone else is hollow. Everyone else has no thematic value here, and everyone else just feels like a shell of their own character from what we've seen before. Granted, I mean, like, I think Hank was one of the few that I was like, I really wish they utilized him better. Like, I wish he just wasn't like the ant maestro and like guiding all of these advanced ants. Like, that was cool. That was fine. It was very like enjoyable, I guess, but it adds nothing to the character. I think Scott's character had enough because we've already seen him so many times, but like Cassie, Hope, and Janet, they never felt like they were part of the movie, like I said, but they just felt hollow, and they just didn't. Yeah, like we learned so much about the quantum realm and about this world, but I feel like the characters inside, we left with so little known about them. And it kind of makes sense for like the quantum realm people. Like, we'll probably never see them again, or we won't see them for a very long time, so that I don't really mind. And even they had like miniature arcs, but like Cassie, she's one of the main characters of this movie, and we barely got an actual arc for her. Like, her whole arc is like, she's Ant Girl now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't understand like what the point of that was, and it just felt like it took a lot of time out of this movie, I guess. Like I said before, even though this is exposition first, I think it could have like worked if they just had a better balance. Like I said, Multiverse of Madness sprinkles in setup with incursions and variants, but it keeps the themes, and it also keeps a sense of style, I guess, because like this movie has no style at all, which I guess now I can just get into it. The visual effects of this movie, right? A lot of people don't like them. I think it looks fine. It's vibrant. It's fun. But I don't think it's like as creative as it could be visually. Like, I think the elements in the quantum realm are really creative. Like the spaceship thing that Hank controls with his arms, that's really, really unique and stuff like that. And I think like in that sense, it's great. But I'm saying like, there's that one shot that they I don't know why they released this clip. Out of all clips to put on digital first, they put a clip of Cassie running in like super shrunk down form, and it's really bad animation. And it's like the only time in this movie where the animation does not look passable. Like that shouldn't look like a final pass of an animation. And that's the only time it looks like that in the movie, and they decided to release that clip. Why they do that, I don't know. But nevertheless, in general, the VFX are good. I mean, you're in a quantum realm. Like I understand if you're behind a green screen and like, for example, the Black Widow explosion. It's like, we know what an explosion looks like. So obviously we're going to be like, that doesn't look right. But when you're in the quantum realm, there's no quantum realm. So like, what are you going to compare it to, right? So for me, it's not a bad, like, it wasn't a bad environment. I think the environment works, but I will say at times in the first act, there's a few bad shots. There's some shots that are not great, but about the 45-minute mark, I would say it's consistently great CG, and yeah. And there's like one or two shots that I can vividly remember with Kang where the CG does not look good. But other than that, all of the effects are great with Kang, especially that final battle with like the massive ants and all of these like I really loved the look of that and the way that like Modok gets pressed up against Kang's shield and the way Kang looks with his mask on. Initially, I wasn't a fan in one of the trailers where his face looked like really distorted because of the blue filter, but in the movie it looks really, really good. So maybe it's just seeing it on the bigger screen, I liked it more. But yeah, I really, really like that aspect of it. But now it's time to speak on just Kang in general because he is by far the best part of this movie. I'll talk about the post-credit scene in a little bit because we get a lot more of Mr. Kang, but damn, is Jonathan Majors great. Like, he's one of the best working actors today. If you guys haven't seen my review for Magazine Dreams, it's another Jonathan Majors movie that's coming out this year. I saw it early at Sundance, but it's coming out later. I think in like fall or November, something like that. He also has Creed 3 coming out. Like, sorry, this is an Antman and the Wasp Quantumania review, but I'm just going to talk about Jonathan Majors because he is phenomenal. He's calm, he's intense, he's scary, he's perfect. Like, you know what it felt like to me? It felt like they just put a camera in front of Jonathan Majors and they were like, read these lines and take however long you want. Because, maybe some people think this isn't good. I think this is great, but like, he's reading the lines, like, it's like one sentence, right? But the one sentence takes like 10 seconds to say. But the way he says it is so powerful and engaging, and like there's no score behind it when he's talking. It's like, it's so perfect. I don't know what they did. Like, I don't know what they did at all, but it works. Like, he just cooked. Like, Jonathan Majors made this character himself. Like, actually, you know what I was gonna say this at the end of this video, but let's say it right now. Kang doesn't feel like a character right now. He just feels like a being, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't feel like I'm watching a character, and maybe it's because the first time I ever saw Jonathan Majors in any project ever, I think, was Loki. I think maybe I watched Harder They Fall before Loki, the finale, but I think I watched it after. The first time I saw him was as He Who Remains. So I had this element of like, he is Kang. Like, he is Kang. Jonathan Majors is Kang. Anytime I watch any other movie, I just see Kang the Conqueror now. But I just love the way that he embodies his character. He really is Kang the Conqueror to me. And that's just after one movie and like 45 minutes in a TV show. Like, I just love the way that like Jonathan Majors like completely takes in this character. Now to just talk about my like thoughts on the ending as a whole. I thought the movie works overall, but the final act was kind of weird to me. Like, I think I will say the goon aspect works for me. Like, I think a lot of people had a problem with it, but I think the whole like Jonathan Majors sends out Kang the Conqueror sends out his army, and then Antman, they all have to fight them while Kang is doing his own thing, trying to get out of there. Like, I think motivation wise that works. Kang knows that. Why would he fight these people when he has goons to do it and he takes off? Like, we don't want to see him escape, but like, as people that know the MCU, I guess maybe I'm just talking about my own personal experience, right? But it's like, I know Kang's the big bad. I know we're getting Kang Dynasty. So is it this Kang that escapes and becomes the prime Kang and like the one that they're fighting in the end of this decade when the movie comes out? Or is he going to die and is it going to be some other Kang and other Kangs that come out and just take over, right? So what is going to happen? Because I know a Kang has to survive. Is it this Kang or not? So I think it works in that sense. I think another movie, I guess I could compare it to another comic movies like the Batman. He fights a bunch of Riddler goons at the end of the movie, and a lot of people, it didn't work for them, but I think it works because it's not necessarily the fact that Batman has a physical need, like a need for physical altercation against the Riddler, and it's not like Kang needs a physical alteration with Ant-Man. Obviously he does when it comes to that necessity, but Batman didn't really need to, and Kang didn't really need to. So I think inherently that goon aspects work. I will say though, like the introduction of the ants and like the transition to the final battle, I was not really a fan of that. Like the hand-to-hand combat scene was great. That was all amazing. But before that, I didn't really, I don't know. The whole like Hank coming out of the spaceship crash and like, that was all right to me. That whole transition to like, these ants their time has been speeding up and they've made a civilization. Like, that was not for me. I was not a fan of that choice. It works story-wise, but I just wasn't a fan of that choice. So that kind of knocks off a few points for me. But the hand-to-hand combat scene was amazing. I loved it. It was a good mix of a bunch of different sound design effects, and just the way that it all plays out is really, really intense, because it's like Kang takes one step through that portal and he escapes. He's done. Like, that's mission accomplished, right? And even a part of me, like, one of my main theories going into this movie was that Kang was going to escape, but it wasn't going to be in a way that, like, the world is instantly at stake. And that's kind of what it kind of happened here. But my further theory was that Ant-Man would get stuck in the quantum realm because he wouldn't be able to shrink down and go back up. But obviously they build the portal here. But at the end of this hand-to-hand combat fight scene, Wasp comes in and saves the day. I like the ominous ending to Kang, and I'll talk about the ending and my prediction for the future, stuff like that in just a second here, because we're nearing the end of the actual movie stuff. But I like that Wasp saved Ant-Man, but it just comes back to like the other use case scenario thing that I was saying, was like, what was Wasp doing for most of this movie? I mean, I know she was sitting around, but like, she had so much potential. It's like when you see Wasp in action, she's just like a cooler Ant-Man. Like, she's just an Ant-Man that can fly. Like, she's so sick, but they don't really utilize her in a way that like, it should have just been called Antman Quantumania. Like, there's this one meme that's going to like Quantumania, but you can look at Antman, but that would have been sick. But they had to include the Wasp in it for continuity reasons, and obviously she comes in and saves the day, and that's cool and all. And then Kang gets sucked into like the orb thing, and he just miniaturizes. Like, I like how it's like ominously gone, and like, I guess the whole ending is kind of ominous as well. Like, the whole, like, they save the day and they go to the narration and that kind of ends it all. But like, Ant-Man or Scott is walking towards the camera and he's like, is he really gone though? He said that like we needed him to save us from whatever's coming. Like, I thought that was a really great tease, and I love the way that it ominously ends, because I wasn't a big fan of like, okay, never mind. I wouldn't say that. I was okay with the ending for Kang here. I think the post-credit scene made me like it a little bit more, just because I kind of had I had another theory spark in my mind, which again, I'll talk about in a second here. But I really enjoyed the way that it ended on an ominous note for the hero. And it kind of makes sense, obviously, like in the future of the MCU and like where they're going with like Kang Dynasty and stuff like that. Like, the Ant-Man is going to be the messenger that's like, yo, there's a guy in the quantum realm and he's saying that he could have saved us, but I kind of like sucked him into like the end of time, or wherever Kang ended up going to at the end of the movie. But yeah, I like the ominous ending to all of this, and I really think that like the post-credit scene enhanced it in a sense, but it still did feel like its own ending, that like, in a sense, like that ending could have been its own post-credit scene where Ant-Man is feeling really ominous within himself, like, okay, what is gonna happen next? Like, what did he mean by everything that he said? So I thought that was really great. But obviously now we have to talk about the post-credit scenes. So the first post-credit scene, just a little descriptor if you guys forgot, we see 3 of the primary Kangs. I don't know their names. I watched the new Rockstar's video on it, as I do after watching a new Marvel movie, but I forgot their names. Yeah, so you see 3 primary Kangs, and they walk out into like this big arena of a bunch of other Kangs, and like here's the general gist of the lines, because I don't know every single one, but they're like, the exiled Kang is dead, so like the one that we saw that was the villain of this movie, and the people on Earth are fighting about the multiverse, and we need to stop them, right? I will say this, the 3 main Kangs look very, very goofy, and I don't know how to describe this. They don't feel like, they feel like a character. They don't feel like Kang. I think it's like just because the costumes, all that kind of stuff are very, very goofy. And like, I'm not going to say they feel like low effort costumes, because the costuming is really good. It just feels weird to see a very humanized version of Kang himself. And like, I think that's all really, really cool. Like what we got in like As He Who Remains and all that kind of stuff. It's like, that's not a creature of Kang. That's a human. That's like the guy. That's a scientist guy. And so I think like that's all fine. But just seeing the like the characters, like it felt very off-putting to me. And maybe that's just me, but I'm not going to say it felt like an SNL skit, because Thor Love and Thunder felt like an SNL skit, but it just didn't feel as serious to me because Kang felt like a character, not like a person in a sense. But here's the thing. They say that the Kang is exiled, he's dead, whatever. And then one of the Kang variants was like, oh, aren't you mad that you weren't the one to kill him, right? So obviously everyone thinks he's dead. And I have a theory that that Kang is actually not dead, like the villain from this movie is not dead, but I'll talk about that after the next post-credit scene. So, next post-credit scene, it takes place in the early 90s, I think. It could be any old time period. I think it was the early 90s. It's a variant of Kang who's introduced to he's introducing like some type of time travel contraption, and then we cut to Loki and Mobius says something along the lines of, who is this, like, is this a scary guy that you were talking about, right? And I'm gonna be honest, I kind of called this. I'm gonna put the tweet up on screen right now, but I kind of called that. Like, I called that it would be like a tie-in to Loki, and the first post-credit scene was kind of like a tie-in to like the all like for time always type of thing, with like showing the multiverse and showing that like the different timelines and that the humans were under like the multiverse and like everyone on Earth was finding out about the multiverse and stuff like that. I'll be honest, I got the general gist of it. I said some specific things that didn't really happen. But yeah, it ties directly into Loki season 2. It felt like a clip straight out of Loki season 2, and I think it works. This is kind of where my like, I guess, thoughts of the future of the MCU go to. Like, this is, I guess, predictions, theories, all that kind of stuff. I am still excited, but I do have one big fear, because I feel like if the Kang of this movie is dead, then that kind of throws in the factor of like, okay, then who's the most powerful Kang? Like, we've seen He Who Remains, who died, and then people were like, oh my god, big powerful Kang. And we see this one and Antman and the Wasp defeat him. And then we just see a whole arena of Kangs that are just cheering, like, oh, like they're just like none of them feel very like intense to me, I guess. So here's the thing. I guess that's kind of my theory, is like, I hope the Kang from this movie isn't dead. First of all, it's just because I don't really care for the others. But here's the thing. For me, if you don't die in the MCU and we don't see your body, then I don't think you're dead, because you can just come back, right? Like that, they've done that multiple times in the MCU. So that's just kind of like my rule of thumb, is like, if you don't see the body, they're not dead. We didn't see Jonathan Majors' dead body as Kang when he died at the end of Quantumania. Also, when he died, he got like sucked into the orb, and he was like still reaching like for something. Like his arms were like flailing. So I do feel like I feel like he has to be alive, and that's why they didn't just like stab him or something like that. Like, maybe that would have been too dark for like an Ant-Man movie. But dude, Scott was getting his ribs crushed by Kang. He was getting the 1-2 Creed combo by Kang. So I don't understand why, if they wanted to kill him off, they could have just completely ended it right there. But instead they got him sucked into the little ball portal thingy. But nevertheless, I feel like this Kang could come back in like a prime Kang-esque way. Like, I guess my big theory is like, have this Kang escape the lower quantum realm or wherever he's at right now in the little portal thing, and then rise to the power of the Kangs internally. This is what happens in the comics with Prime Kang. Again, I'm not a big avid comic reader, but I know the general gist of the Kangs, right? And so you have this like internal rise of power within the Kangs with one of the Prime Kangs. And the thing is, I hope that the Prime Kang, whoever it may be, even if it's not this one, I hope that it's not one in a silly, goofy costume, because I just cannot take that seriously. And like, maybe I will if the writing's that great, but the people that are writing Quantumania are apparently writing Kang Dynasty, so I don't know how that's going to end up going. But anyways, I just don't feel like a character version of Kang is really going to cut it for me personally. Maybe it will for you guys, but for me, I feel like I need like a Jonathan Majors like first. Like, I don't want like a Pharaoh Kang. Like, I want Jonathan Majors in the character as Kang. So again, you have this Kang, you lead him into power, you give him a rise of power internally, and then he leads the Kangs in Dynasty. Like, he is the big prime Kang that everyone is fearing. And I kind of feel like I wish maybe in the post-credit scene in this movie, they alluded to the fact that Kang wasn't dead. Like, I feel like that would have been a little bit better rather than like showing all the variants. I think for spectacle's sake and like pleasing audiences of like, okay, this guy is the big overall, like there's multiple versions of him. But the thing is, I don't want to be in fear of Kang because he's like unlimited in the multiverse. I want to fear Kang because he's so powerful. And obviously the power comes in numbers to an extent, and that's fine as well, and I totally get that. But it's just not as interesting to me, and Kang becomes like 10 times less compelling if you give me just like a bunch of like random stuff. It's like, oh, there's a bunch of him, but he's also like, some of these people are smart, some of these are dumb. It's like, no, like, make one that's insanely smart, and the other ones are really smart, but they're just like just a little bit below your prime Kang, the one that everyone in the multiverse fears. So that's pretty much it for my general thoughts on like the future of the MCU post Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. But as a whole, I enjoyed this movie. I think there's pros and there's cons, obviously, but it's like I wasn't expecting to be so mixed on this because I was super excited for this movie, heavily anticipating it. Honestly, I don't know, I might be one of the few people that was really, really, really genuinely excited for this movie for just Ant-Man and Kang and not just like the future of the MCU. Like I was excited for this story alone, and the story was fine, but it sucks that it was just fine because you can do so much with Ant-Man losing time and then wanting to get time back with Cassie and just Kang. And the pieces were there, in my opinion, but they just didn't execute it on a script level. And I think like I said in the very beginning of this video, the base of the story was super interesting and intriguing, but they just didn't really execute it, in my opinion. As of now, I'm going to go for Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania a 6.5 to 7 out of 10. I haven't said it just yet. I'm going to rewatch it this weekend in theaters, probably in IMAX this time because I watched it in Dolby previously, but I'm excited to rewatch it and kind of finalize a score. I do have it set in my MCU ranking though, I think. I don't think that's going to shift. So again, look out for that video this weekend as well. And as always, let me know your guys' thoughts on Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania in the comments down below. But that's it for all of my spoiler-filled thoughts on the movie. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.